Or How I Met Your Mother.
Okay, I lied. Actually, give me 2 seconds.
Oh, you go ahead.
If you haven't signed up for Skyfall, you should, because you want to go see the movie.
I did.
It's $10, and you get 1 free drink with that, because Deviant will set up bar in the parking lot of the movie theater. He's going to wear a tux and make you a vodka martini shaken, not stirred. However, if you wear formal dress tonight, which is black, white, or gray, I'm told, nothing else is acceptable, except for the women, in which case anything is acceptable, because this is Deviant after all. It's an open bar. What's that?
Something.
And no, you can't put on a short skirt. Okay, I'm sorry, I just didn't want to.
No, I said for the ladies.
For the ladies, something is
desired.
I'm not entirely certain of that. Anyway, so open bar at that point. So please sign up. Go to the reg desk, hand over $10 in your name, like a business card or a note or whatever. Egyptian hieroglyphs are not included in that. It has to be legible, readable, that kind of thing. We've still got some food if you're hungry. After the talk, grab.
What time is it?
I believe it's 8:30 at the Cinemark 10. 8 o'clock bar opens, 8:30 the movie starts, which of course means that it actually starts at about 8:45 or 9. So how many damn previews they put in movies these days? Get off my lawn, damn kids. But I saw Jack Daniel, I had to go curmudgeon on everybody. And I hope you're having a good time. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Thanks, Josh.
What if we're not? Refund.
Too goddamn bad. Yes,
Right.
I'll pay you double your money back.
Nice. Where's the Cinemark?
It's like about a mile away. It's like it's 2 minutes away.
All right, so even before I go into the who am I like the fact that we're all talking. Feel free to interrupt us at any time, ask questions. We like the interaction, we like the feedback. So I'm Bob Weiss, PW Crack, president and founder of Postwar England, and I'm a DEF CON goon. To my right is Benjamin Gatti, Benjamin OG on Twitter. He's one of the developers of OpenVPN, and he's an independent consultant type person. So if Alan Turing were alive today, he'd be here. He'd be messing around with the best computing technology. He would be he'd be unconstrained by our social problems that he encountered, which we don't have today. He would be what was I going to say about that one? I had a line. I forgot my line.
Nice, nice.
Right.
Cue card.
Yeah, exactly. Line. You know, he would be. This is a guy who won World War II.
Your line wasn't coded.
No, I got it. He won World War II. He invented the computer, and when he was persecuted for his sexual predispositions, he told the judge, "I've done nothing wrong," and he stood up for himself. So this is definitely a guy who would be very welcome in our community, probably be welcome in any community, and someone who we should all be looking up to, and someone who we don't know as much about as we should, because a lot of the work that he did was classified until recently. Yeah, go ahead.
Suicide, or was he killed?
He committed suicide after he was chemically castrated by the government, and his security clearance was revoked.
Did they kill him, or was it really suicide?
Oh no, I assume suicide. I think that's the.
I think his Wikipedia article says it was suicide, but it's suspected that it could be something else.
Okay, so I haven't heard that maybe there was foul play involved. I think suicide's the default position, but again, clearly I don't know. So demo time. Fuck it, we're going to do it live. Yes, this is always subject to failure. It worked at 4.4Con. It failed at SkyDogCon. And we're going to switch computers. Why are we doing the demo up front? Because it takes about 45 minutes to run. So we have to get it started right at the beginning. And all right, so don't hit solve yet. Take a look up top. This is our Enigma crypt text. It's what it looks like coming out of the machine. And that is what we're going to attempt to decrypt. As it solves, we're going to see sort of coming up below that software that we've developed is going to pop up the best guess that it's achieved so far. So when we hit solve right away, the best guess is going to be very bad, right? It's going to be completely illegible and not show anything that's in any way useful, and then it's going to start to get a little bit better, right? And you might start to see some characters pop up, and with any luck, you hit it, right?
Yeah, it started.
And with any luck, it finishes before the talk, right? But you never know. It may or may not work. So we're going to tell you a little bit about the Enigma machine so you have some context for what we are doing. Describe the software that we've created and how it breaks it, and go back to the demo at some point. We may switch back and forth. You got it?
I think so.
Nothing on my screen.
How much power did they have in Bletchley Park versus on your PC? I mean, how much computing power?
So let me get to that,
Okay,
right? Okay,
sure.
let me talk about I'll talk about what Bletchley did versus what we're doing, right? Because we are not implementing what Bletchley did on the laptop.
Oh.
There's not a one-for-one correspondence. What we're doing is different. So why do we care about the Enigma? I presume many of you have heard of the Enigma machine, maybe somewhat familiar with the history and what's going on. There's really two reasons why we care about the Enigma. The first reason is, in the world of cryptography and cryptanalysis, this machine and this event occurs at a very interesting inflection point. So prior to the Enigma, you typically have a series of encoding schemes or crypto schemes, which are generally pretty trivial, right? Limited entropy, limited complexity, and generally the cryptanalysts, the people trying to break the code, are the winners, right? Codes are regularly getting created, broken, created, broken, created, broken. And that's our history up to the Enigma machine. And the Enigma machine comes out, and there's this massive spike in complexity, right? The first sort of real crypto system that's really getting complex, and it's going to really be hard to break. And that's sort of right where the Enigma comes out. And I'll explain that a little bit, put that complexity in a little bit more perspective a little bit later. The other piece of the Enigma machine is it's all tied into, it's not just that there's this crypto history timeline and you have little complexity, huge spike, massive complexity, but that spike happens to happen at a very interesting time in world history, right? It's World War II, and our ability to break this device, or Alan Turing's ability to break this device, changes the course of World War II and world history, and there's a sort of fascinating stories about how it was done and the intelligence that comes out of it. It sort of is very interesting in and of itself if you have any interest in history. So that's sort of the two reasons why we still care about the Enigma today. Obviously, no one's using it for any kind of crypto or encoding on a daily basis today. Actually, after one of our talks, an interesting story, I'll completely digress. After one of our talks, some guy comes up to me, and he's seen that we've just been able to break the Enigma. And he comes up to me and he says, I can't tell you where I work, but our company is still using the Enigma. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, we decided that nobody would know, is if we use the Enigma machine to pass our keys back and forth, nobody would ever guess, right? Because who would use that? And I said, it's like, you have to tell your boss to stop that immediately, right? It was like, first of all, we've just broken it, but second of all, it was like, anybody could figure this out, right? It was like, security through obscurity, not so good, and you must stop that immediately. He goes, I know, I keep telling him, but it's like, but he won't listen. And I'm like, here's my card, have him call me, but whatever, but you can't keep doing this.
Did he call you?
No, I have not gotten that call. I don't know that, and I don't know the name of the company.
But maybe
right?
this time
I don't know that they're still using it, right? But yeah, it's like security through obscurity, right? It'll come back and bite you in the butt at any point in time, and there's like you'd be stunned, right, at what people are still doing. So first thing, there is no the Enigma, right? There's no single machine. That's the Enigma. Boom, we're done. It is a series of machines and a series of upgrades. There are multiple versions. There are people who collect these machines today, and some of the machines are rarer than others, and hence more valuable. Yeah, go ahead.
Did we call it the Enigma, or did they call it the Enigma?
The Germans
They
called it, yeah,
called it, yeah.
that's the commercial. The first version is a commercial version. It's used in banks in the 30s, called the Enigma. Yeah. So there are multiple versions. There's an Army and a Navy version. They basically work. They're interchangeable in terms of cryptography. They basically work the same. One of them has letters, A through Z, on the wheels. The other one has numbers 1 through 26 on the wheels, but basically they're, again, interchangeable. Later on, the Germans add a 4th wheel, so there's 3 and 4 wheel versions. There's interchangeable router versions or variable reflector versions. So, so you can look at different machines. They basically all work the same. Most of them are compatible with each other. A 3 wheel is not going to be compatible with a 4 wheel, though you can stop. This doesn't rotate, so the 4 wheel will be compatible with the 3 wheel, but not the other way around. Hit the slide. All right, so I can't explain, I don't want to take the time to explain in detail how the machine works, right? I want to give you an overview of sort of where the complexity comes from in this device. And sort of, I'm going to run through it real quickly, okay? So this is sort of a gross simplification of the machine. There are 3 wheels, 1, 2, 3, out of a total of 5. At the very beginning of the work, they always start off with the 3, then later on they add the additional 2. Later, very much later, they add another 3. But assume for most of the machines, most of the war, you're looking at 3 wheels go into the machine out of a total of possible 5 wheels. That gives you 60 combinations of ways to put the wheels in the machine. Obviously, I can't put in wheel 1, wheel 2, and wheel 1 because I only have one of them, right? So that's where you get the 60, is that the 60 combinations of ways to put 5 possible wheels in the 3 possible slots.
So just a quick point.
Oops, I'm sorry.
All right, go back 1 second.
Can I do that?
Yeah, these dots apparently here, here, and here seem to indicate the wheel marker. But more importantly is that the data enters the wheel from the right. This is called the fast wheel because it turns every character. This wheel only turns once every 26 characters, and this wheel only once every time this turns 26 characters. So this is called the slow wheel. And then it hits the reflector, and very importantly, each pin in the reflector is connected to another pin which sends the signal back through the 3 again. And they did this to increase, quote, the complexity, but in doing so they introduced a kind of very important mouse hole, right? And that is that the character starting on the right is mixed around. Each time it goes through the loop, it's bounced back, and it can come back as any character with the one exception of the character it started as. So when you encrypt the letter D, it can come back as any character except D. And this is really, to answer the other question, how do they solve the problem in Bletchley Park? That's the majority of how they solve the problem in Bletchley Park, that flaw. Our work really doesn't take that flaw into much account.
So there was non-randomness.
No, quite, right? It was actually inverse chi, if you will, right? So the most popular letter to come out of the machine would be anything other than E.
Right.
All right, the least popular would be E.
And in modern crypto, right, a secure crypto system should leave no information, right? So the fact that I know even the slightest thing about, take the first letter in the message, right, and it's a K, right? I now know something about the original message, right? It did not start off with the letter K.
Wow.
Now, that may not be all that useful, right? But in a modern crypto system, you would look at, the first bit is 0 or 1. What does that tell you about the message? It must tell you absolutely nothing, right? Or it's not secure. So, so each of the wheels has this little notch in it. This is what effectively kicks off that odometer-like rolling between the fast wheel kicking off, rolling the middle wheel, and then the slow wheel. That notch can be moved. There's a pin in here. You pull it down, you rotate this whole thing around, you let the pin go. So you can notch this, put the notch at 8 or the notch at 9 or whatever. Now because that notch affects the way the odometer rolls over, it affects when the fast wheel is going to push the medium wheel, and it affects when the medium wheel is going to push the slow wheel. The slow wheel has nothing to push. So I can set the slow wheel notch somewhere, and the Germans actually have that in their code book. This is where you put the notch on the slow wheel, but it doesn't change anything. Yeah.
So the purpose of that, then, the resulting code is to say that makes sure that you can't tell the signature of the machine.
No, this is going to totally change the setup of the machine, which is going to change the encryption in a pretty significant way, with the exception of that slow wheel, where I can move that notch in any one of 26 positions and it has no effect.
So for other reasons, they actually identified the senders, not the machine so often, but the individual doing the transmissions by the pulsing, the rapidity of the pulsing, and so forth. It's all hand keyed. The results of this would go into hand keyed into wireless.
So this should be 26 to the 2. That's a typo, or 676 possible options of where I can set the notches on the first 2 wheels. Again, I'm not trying to explain to you how an Enigma works, just want to give you a rough breakdown. So then you close the machine up, you've got the message settings. This could be anywhere from A to Z, A to Z, A to Z, 26 to the 3rd options, or 17,576 possibilities for message settings. All of these are multiplying. So right now we've got 60 plus times 26 to the 2 times 26 to the 3 complexity. Now in the commercial version, there's no Stecker board, which is German for plug board. These are the plugs on the front of the machine. These are the keys on the top. And we've been looking down on it. Now we're looking at it from the front. The German Army and Navy add the plug board. This is a huge cryptographic advance. It's where almost all of the complexity of the machine comes from. What this does is, as I'm going to press a key, it's going to go into the plug board first, and I can plug any letter, W, into any other letter, G. I have 10 wires to do that, so I can make 10 sets of connections for a total of 150 trillion possibilities. Why, if there's 26 letters, I could connect 13, right? Make 13 pairs of connections. Why would I only have 10 wires, right? Actually leaving some unconnected increases the complexity. If I told you that you had to take 13 wires and connect 13 pairs of letters, it starts to constrain some of the settings. So the maximum complexity is with 11 wires. It's only slightly higher than 10 wires. So 10 wires being faster, simpler, and uses less wire, because there's almost no difference between 10 and 11. You go 10 wires is really the maximum, it's the best possible combination of wires to do this. So you end up with 26 factorial factorial. Combinations are 150 trillion, and obviously that's a lot bigger than any of the other settings, right? But all these multiply together to set up the machine. Once I do this, I am going to encrypt my message, and it can only be decrypted by someone at the other end who has a similar machine and knows all of the settings that I use to set it up. So the expected complexity of that would be equivalent to 2 to the 77th. So in modern crypto world, DES is breakable by multiple different ways. A big pile of FPGAs would break DES at 2 to the 56th. A distributed system of computers can break DES at 2 to the 56th. But DES is still going to be hard to break, right? It'd be hard to get a key out of DES at 2 to the 56th. But if we're today, 2 to the 56 is going to be a little bit too insecure because it could be broken in a reasonable amount of time. AES has a complexity of 2 to the 128th. How big is that? 2 to the 128th is roughly bigger than all of the atoms in the galaxy, right? So we were talking the other day, someone said, oh, what if I created an organic computer and I used all the molecules in the ocean on Earth to somehow compute the AES key? I'm like, you'd be really far from even possibly computing an AES key, right? Using every molecule in the ocean, and you're not even close. So, so that's a really big number, right? So the Enigma clearly would be, in terms of complexity, pretty sound as a crypto system in today's standards, right? We would not expect, because if you came to be a secure version of AES with the complexity of the key reduced down to 2 to the 77th, we would not expect to be able to break that on a laptop, right? That 2 to the 77th, 2 to the 76th, that's going to be very secure for today's standards, and that would pass muster with any cryptanalyst that you would have. So again, let me just go through this to answer the question earlier. Rough history of how this was used, right? Marian Rejewski, Polish Cipher Bureau. The Poles in 1932 are the best cryptanalysts in the world. They are the top mathematicians. They get a hold of the one of the Enigma machines. They're able to figure out and deduce mathematically all of the settings. They start decrypting German traffic. They create a machine to do so, the Polish bomb, in 1938. Why is it called a bomb? We don't know. Some people suggest maybe it had a ticking sound, but really not sure. And they keep that all secret right up until the time that Poland realizes Hitler's probably going to invade and take over Poland, right? Which is not a huge logical leap for them because they were probably reading the messages, right? They kind of knew exactly when he was going to take over Poland. So they have a little bit of setback in 1938. The Germans add 2 rotors, and the Poles go dark. They can't read it. This is a similar history at Bletchley Park as well. When the Germans change the machine, there's periods of time when we can't read it. But largely, the Germans tend to iterate on the machine, right? They don't throw it out and put it in all new machines. They modify the machine slightly. And that's a huge deal because that enables us to sort of recover after a certain period of time and get back to the ability to decrypt the messages. So the Poles in 1939, just before the invasion, tell the French, they're like, hi, you don't know us, we're the Polish Cipher Bureau. Oh, by the way, we can read all the German messages. Would that be interesting to you guys? The French, sacre bleu, I have no idea what to do. I do not know. We better call the British. So they're like, British, beat the Poles, right? You guys talk. And British, recognize what they've got. They stand up a encryption or decryption team run by Alan Turing at Bletchley Park. And what they're doing is using that one flaw that no letter can be encrypted as itself. They create cribs. So I take a message, and here's a message that comes out of some weather station in France. It's a German weather station. And this guy wakes up every morning, and he radios back the weather. It's like, Nice, weather station, it's raining, right? That's my job, right? Weather station, however, in German is, anyone know weather station in German? What? No, it's really long.
Ist dein Tochter 18 bitte?
I'll go with that, right? So it's like a 20-character word, right? So
12, I think.
Anybody
Is it
know
12?
German?
Well,
So, right. So it's a long word, right?
It's like Wetter Vorhersage, something like, I don't know what the station would be.
Right. So this guy's, broadcasting this every single day, right? You break it one time, you know his format, right, for his layout. You don't even need, you could know what the weather is, right? Because that's public information. But you don't even need to, right? All you're trying to do is basically place the word for weather station somewhere in this message and see, and it's going to eliminate a whole series of codes because one of these 12 letters is going to line up with one of the letters that it couldn't have encrypted itself as, right? So we know that set of settings cannot be correct, right? So you go through and you're able to reduce it.
So more precisely, before you even turning the machine over, just in paper, right? You can take the crypt text and take the word weather station and start it 0 aligned and look at every of the 12 characters. If there's an E where there's an E or a G where there's a G, or any other characters that match in both cases, it's a non-match. And you index it 1 forward, and then you do the same check. And you index it again 1 forward and do the same check. Eventually you find like the 1 or 2 places in this message where 12 characters could fit without colliding with themselves somewhere in the crypt text. No machine at all.
Right.
And they already can guess where it goes in the machine, right? So now you have 12 characters in the German and 12 in the crypt. You take those 12 and you create what they call a menu. And it's a little bit complicated. It has to do with paired characters and other parts of the machine, but they create this menu which is like a B tree. It's a couple of options. It could be this or this. It could be this or this. It could be this or this. Very simple logical relay computation that's then plugged in with a series of large plugs that handle like 26 characters at a go. They connect the F to the A and the G to the R, and then they spin up the machine. And essentially they eliminate huge swaths of rotor combinations which collide in other ways. And the 5 or 6 which are left, then they go to the actual machine and turn them out and check them and then decipher the code.
Right. And the Germans use most of the code, other than the message settings, most of the code is the same for every unit in the Army or the Navy for the entire day. So once they get the settings for the day, the message settings will change for every message, right? If there's only 17,000 of those, once you get the rest of the message of the machine settings for the day, you got the whole Army for the whole day. So that's what the British are doing using crib-based decryption. That's what Alan Turing figures out. They build these big machines. They name them the bomb also after the Polish, because they know about the Polish machine as well. And then later on at the very end, they're doing so much of this stuff, they need more machines. And so I think
That's supposed to be a 4?
Yeah.
That's 94.
Yeah,
So that was encrypted.
right. So I've given the talk 3 times and I still haven't corrected that typo. So at the very end, we help them out by building more of the machines, right? The United States comes in as like, well, yeah, we've got what becomes National Cash Register out in Dayton, Ohio, is brought in and said, hey, here's the plans, go build a lot of these, and we start shipping them around the world, and we're using them. So that's our contribution to the message. So Ben, go ahead.
So we wanted to approach the problem from a more modern cryptanalysis point of view. What they had done was essentially a side channel attack. Most of what they attacked depended on knowing something about the message. They knew that it had the word weather station in it, for example. Absent that, there was no assault on the message or the crypt. So we have to run up a lot of tests. I mean, potentially 2 to the 77, right? That's way too many. You cannot brute force the Enigma machine. So we had to, first of all, we switched to OpenCL to massively parallelize some of the analysis. Memory was always a problem, and so we found, we had to have a database that could handle, a large number of tests. There was definitely a large number of tests involved. Okay, so I think now we can talk about what we did to avoid brute force. And it should be said that any cryptanalysis system essentially should be multiplicative, right? If you have a single-digit password and you add a second digit, it should be 10 times more difficult to break. And if you add a third and a fourth, it should be 10 and 100 times again. So the device should be multiplicative, and this is the Steckers. That should be that complexity should multiply with the complexity of the rotor system. Once it goes through the rotor system, it reflects and goes back again through the Steckers. So they appear, the Steckers appear at the front and they appear at the back, and the rotors appear in the middle, and it's a sandwich, if you will. It should be noted, and we actually had a wonderful dinner, courtesy of the NSA, yeah, the nice people of the NSA, because they lost the bet. And they confused the fact that the plug board is the same plug board on the front and the bottom and the back. But it has a very, very, very different effect. This is a Caesar cipher, essentially. It's a fixed cipher, A equals Z, and it does so for the entire message. If you do that on the front, in other words, if you jumble up your crypt text, and you have one of these connect pairs wrong, then every time your crypt text is a Z, you incur the error. And the error is rerouted into a random part of the rotor, goes through randomly, and comes out as something quite random. But on the other hand, on the outbound side, and by the way, it's the same mistake because there's only one plug, but on the outbound side of the plug board, a Z map to an A results in crypt text in which all the Z's are replaced by A's. It's really quite obvious, and it's fairly simplistic because there's only one character that's missing. So if you typed out D 26 times and you had one plug board wrong, you might expect on the outbound side that D would map to an E, for example. But that isn't really what happens, because every time you get the wrong plug on the crypttext, that thing is routed to hell and beyond. So it incurs the full complexity of the machine. So it's important to look at the plugboard at the front and the plugboard at the bottom as really two separate challenges. They're both Caesar ciphers, but we attack them very differently. So the bottom is a pretty standard Caesar cipher. This is right next to your plain text. You simply look at the most frequent letter. That's your E. The second most frequent letter is probably your T, and so on. That is really pretty effective at this point. But on the front end, that is not effective at all. So what we did in the front is rather interesting. And this is really where most of the complexity disappears. And that is, we took all the characters in the crypttext and split them up by their number. So we put all the E's in a basket, all the B's in a basket, all the N's in a basket, wherever they lined up in the text. It's kind of like sampling a barrel of wine. You put your spoon in, you pull it out, you taste the wine. Well, wherever you sample the wine, it's going to taste pretty much the same. In other words, if you have a basket of characters produced by E's in the first position, in the 32nd position, in the 47th position in your message, at the end of the day, you should have, if it's properly solved, a bucket of letters that represents a distribution of language, not random noise. So you can take individual channels, if you will, and these steckers being a channel, and analyze them by themselves. And you should get chai if you've got a match on that channel, and not chai if you don't.
So let me interrupt. So two things. You need to explain chai, and then just so that everyone can watch the, just so you guys can watch, right? Just so that you can watch the train wreck happening. We should, when you're done with this slide, let's go back to the thing.
Okay.
If we're going to demo fail, you know, and embarrass ourselves, you guys want to be in on it, right? So,
yeah. All right. So the train wreck is what? It's well underway.
It's well underway.
All right. It's okay. So I think the next slide actually has an image of sorted chai. So what you can see here is that if you sort the distribution of frequency and put the largest one at the front, it's going to be ET, NA, and so on, right? So what you do is you take all of the buckets. It doesn't matter how they come out. It doesn't matter what you label them at the bottom. You just sort them by popularity, and you compare this distribution to the distribution you're getting.
Switch it. So this is the letter distribution of all the letters in the alphabet, right? E being the most common, and so it has the highest frequency of occurring, right? Chi is a measure of how well the text that you're measuring matches the expected letter frequencies of English, or it could be German, we don't really care, right? Or it could be any language, etc. But what you're looking for is, you know, if I had a high chi, there'd be a clear signal that this is starting to look like language and it's starting to match English, right? If you have a low chi, there's a lot of randomness and it's looking like noise, right? So as we test each one, chi is the test that we're using to say, you know, well, do these settings are these settings starting to look like what we would expect to see in a message? Yeah, go ahead.
What body, how big does the sample have to be before it breaks down to the exact percentage?
Good question. Nobody asked us that at SkyDogCon. They did ask it for ForCon. So the larger a sample we use, the better better performance we get out of the test, right? So to get this done in under 45 minutes, we're using a fairly large sample of 2,000. We could probably get this down into the 500 character range and still get a signal. It just take a little bit longer. It'll probably take us, you know, 6 or 8 hours to break a message instead of 45 minutes. Because we also using the software does a lot of sort of multi-threaded attempts, and so it's not only multi-threaded in the computer, but we're assigning the work to the GPU and the CPU based on sort of where we can get the best bang for the buck, so that as we identify a setting that might look good, we want to explore that a little bit more in depth. We give that a higher ranking within the software. We spend some time doing that. So that ranking kind of pops faster if we use a larger sample. But so eventually it would always
real quick before this refreshes. Right. We start at the bottom with what we call gross chi. And
this is running now.
Right. And we bucket the results, right, based on the chi value that comes out. We have 14 candidates at 4.4, 16,000 candidates at 4.3, and the bulk of them are in the 4.1 category, right? So then we skim off the top of these. These candidates then roll up into the next stage. So this is gross chi. Now, what is gross chi based on? What actually gets through the machine when it's completely befuddled? If the Steckers, if they'd gone all the way to 13 Steckers and plugged every character to every other character, there's a very good chance that we couldn't do this. We couldn't do this exploit because really the only data that's making it through in the first pass are the 6 characters that are unsteckered. Those go through the Caesar cipher unaffected. So 6 is a percent of 26, like 1 out of 4 or 5, 1 out of 6, I think, something in that range. So every 6th letter is essentially going through. Shall we say all the T's, all the R's, all the S's, pick any 6, right? In the crypt text, those characters are going through the rotors as they should, and at least getting through the rotors correctly if the rotors are in the right position. We still have a lot of spinning of the rotors to do, but if we do get the rotors in the right position, 6 characters out of 26 characters will have gone through correctly, and that's just enough to eke out some difference of chi in the first pass.
Right. It can give you a hint. Basically, it's going to leak a hint that you've gotten close to the right setting, ignoring the Steckers, right? So you still have to run millions of tests, which is why we're using the GPU, but we're going to get a hint. And it doesn't necessarily always work. And as I say, it can demo fail, definitely. We're definitely taking some risk, but where's the fun in not taking any risk, right? But it will, based on the fact that 6 of these letters are not steckered, that is enough to leak some sort of a message. And it's very interesting. I don't know how many of you guys know Dave Schutz, who's Darth Null on Twitter. He's also a crypto guy, and I asked him. I said, "Hey, David, I got a crypto system that sort of leaks entropy." He's like, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, when I run a test, it kind of tells me am I getting warmer or colder, right, from the correct setting." And he's like, "What do you mean?" I kept trying to explain this to him. I was like, I was looking for is the name. I wanted to know what to call it on the slide. And he's like, "I don't know of any system like that, right? We can't come up with a name for it, so we're using the hot or colder game." But basically, the Enigma plays hot or colder with us. We guess a setting, and it tells us whether or not you're, warmer or colder, which is very interesting. I mean, I'm not aware of any other system that acts like that. Yeah. So you want to go up to the top?
So we take the Stecker isolation is the next stage, and in this case we break the crypt text down letter by letter and analyze the results for each letter. So it's 26 times more complicated than the first pass, but only 26 times more complicated, right? It's not trillions of times more complicated as it could be because we analyze them each stovepipes. And that yields even better results into the third stage, which is where I think we bottle those results back up. So in the third stage, we recombine the Steckers, meaning to say we take, if the relationship between A and K scored well, and the relationship between Q and R scored well, and the relationship between Z and Y scored well, now we can combine those together. We need about 10 of those. We take the best 10, maybe the best 12, recombine them, get rid of some of the bad ones. Try that in a couple of different ways, and then we get the results out of the third stage. That usually gets us pretty close. The final stage is fairly cosmetic, meaning it's a stage that was often done. Oops, look at that.
Yeah. So this is not entirely readable, right? Y N other one got caught today. Id all over the papers. Teenager. So we definitely have text here, right? I mean, this is getting close, right? But it's not exactly done. Now, based on this, does anyone know what that is yet? What? Damn kids, right? All right, but no one knows exactly what the text is yet.
Petraeus' biography.
Who? Petraeus' biography. So no, so we'll go back to the. So I want
Very
you to,
funny.
I
Best
want
joke
you to
all
see
day.
it. That's right. I want you
You
to
haven't
see
seen the
this
German
as
text.
it's happening, right?
So I was thinking at lunch, right? Petraeus is going to spend some time in the same box with Manning.
Right, Bradley Manning.
Bradley Manning.
You guys know each other, right? Good. Here you go. Let's go back to the pick up where we left off on the PowerPoint.
All right.
So again, I wanted you to see that sort of in process, right? It's not done yet, but clearly it's figuring out where we are and what it's looking for.
So at that point, it's basically cracked. What really is going to happen is, if the second wheel is off by 1 notch, and this gets into the middle of, actually the next slide. I think this is called diagonal. So this is going to be stack isolation to explain. Again, with the beginning of the E's, right? They all, in encrypt, they all amount to some different letter. When you decrypt them, but the E's, if you just took the characters from the E's and attached them together, you'd still have a collection of letters that look like language rather than a collection of letters that looks like alphabet soup.
Yeah, so if I add, can you go back one?
I can do.
So I have a group of settings. I put my crypt text in, my settings, I decrypt. I end up with this. This is my test decryption. And I go through and I just take, for instance, I bucket up all the E's. Then I bucket up, A, B, C, D, whatever. I make 26 buckets. If I take these letters, T, O, U, and so on, and I line them all up, and I calculate the chi of that combination of letters, does that seem to match language? Right? Does it seem to match with what I would expect to see in English? If it does, I'm on the right trail with this. If
So it doesn't imply that it looks like a word, even though you could say this word. It doesn't matter that word order or anything like that. It's simply the letter frequency. But by the way, when you put English letters together and the frequency is proper, it often makes things that look like words because it's just the right number of characters are there. So this is a really important slide, right? I mean, last time we gave the talk, we decided that we didn't spend enough time here, but this is the bit of math, right? And if you contemplate this math, it's kind of interesting. This is the double factorial of 26, which is all the possible ways you could stacker a stacker board. Excellent. There are 6 wires missing, so we take those out of the complexity, but that's a huge number. 26 to the cubed is what we have left. That's only 16,000, 17,000 options. So it's a huge reduction in the complexity. So this is really where, again, the commercial grade did not have a stacker board, right? So by pawning the complexity that they added to the stacker board, we've essentially reduced the machine down to its commercial grade machine, which is just the rotors. And those are pretty easy to spin up. I mean, we can spin them really quickly. Because of this and other things, we have to do it an awful lot of times, but it doesn't take very much time to spin the rotors. Diagonal conflation, kind of touched on this with a notch, right? I mean, you move the notch, but you haven't really changed very much. So yes, it has almost nothing to do with the first wheel. The second wheel will roll over 1 click in the wrong space. So if you're off by 1, then every 26 characters, you'll lose 1 character, but then you'll get it back in the next go, right?
So if I take something and I encrypt, set the notches to AAA, I set the message setting to AAA, and I encrypt that, and I encrypt this as a sample sentence, right? And then I'm going to decrypt it at AAA, so I get the exact same sentence right back. Everything looks good. But what if I decrypt it, but I guess wrong? I guess AAD and AAD, right? I get this is a sample sentence, but this is screwed up, right? BZB, showing diagonal conflation, and these two are wrong. Actually, a third one would be wrong here, and then it would go back to
There's always
normal.
26 characters between these groups, right?
Because this is 3 different than this in the same place, which means that I don't need to test AAA, AAB, AAC, and so on. I can test every 5th one or so, and I'm going to get enough of these coming out right to be able to test for chi. Go.
You're doing this strictly by captured ciphertext, right? You don't have any
Correct.
hardware, you don't have any keys. You're just
Right.
capturing the ciphertext over there.
Right. All we started off with is the cipher.
So we only have about 10 minutes The subtitle of our talk is How I Met Your Mother. This is, I think, why we should know
your mother.
Right? This is your mother. So this is a very similar machine to the Enigma. You see the wheels again. Rather than digits or characters, you see a bunch of tabs in here. And actually, these can go up or down. You can flip them into position or out of position. So there's a lot of complexity that you can represent on the machine. This is the machine that Strategic Command was using for strategic, larger messages. It's obviously a heavier machine. Power is required to run it. It's not portable. So it's not field messages being sent to mobile units wirelessly. This was a device that would have been used Strategic Command, often by a ground wire, and it was automated. The sending machine is a spinning wheel, and it sends the codes automatically to a machine that punches it out on paper on the other end. It's a pretty sophisticated process. They also pawned this machine in Bletchley Park with Alan Turing. And the way they did this is really remarkable, but what's important to understand with this machine is that it uses XOR. So 5 bits will give you a full alphabet, right? So teletype machines at that time would punch tape 5 bits at a time. This machine would XOR one of those bits. And it would XOR
all the bits with
Well, it would
key,
XOR all
right?
that with a key. These wheels rotate in order to generate the key. And then it would be XORed, and then you get the results. And the wheels would index once every time the message was advanced. Now, interestingly enough, it has 2 sets of wheels. I'm not sure if it's the left pair or the right pair, or if there's another one behind, but there's essentially 2 wheels. One indexes every time you make a character. The second wheel indexes occasionally, like sometimes it indexes and sometimes it doesn't. Very interesting. What they did was they got 2 messages that it was repeat, right? It's like, I didn't hear you the first time, can you send it again? And so they said, sure, I can send it again, no problem. So they wound the machine back, and they sent the message through again, essentially the same key space, but it was not quite right. And when you do that, it's called a depth. And in an XOR technology, you can take one from the other, and you can peel out the 2 messages, and basically you zipper them together. You know for each bit that it's going to produce, because you have 2 messages, you have to produce 2 strings of English, 2 words that spell check, if you will, on each side. So you can take the letters and letters that if I have 2 crypts and I have a common key, I can pick which way the bit would have gone, because it only went one of 2 ways. One way produces 2 letters that spell check. The other way does not produce 2 letters that spell check. So that's the magic of unraveling a key from a double sentence.
Right, so the Lorenzo machine is important in 2 ways, right? It's here comes binary, right? We don't have a computer yet, but here comes your first binary. It's 0s and 1s, making an alphabet, as opposed to typing an A and a B, which is the immediate predecessor of the Enigma machine. You're actually typing an A, B, C, D. The second thing that is happening at the Lorenz level is your first introduction of XOR, which, as you will go forward in cryptanalysis, you realize all cryptanalysis is based on XOR, right? Not the XOR where that's the only part of the cryptanalysis, right? But based on the security of XORing one-time pad with a piece of text, right? Or text and a key that are the same length. So this is in that one machine at that one point in time at Bletchley Park. You have the beginning, right? This is your mother, right? This is the beginning of computing and cryptanalysis all coming together in the same place at the same time.
So what does this machine do? It's very complicated. It's actually very simple. This can be thought of as not much more than a counter. It has a series of light banks roughly in this region, and they count. It's a decade counter. It counts up to like 10,000 or something like that. It's incredibly simplistic. What they did is they took the key and they put it into this paper tape in the back. And you'll see here. Now initially they had 2 paper tapes. One was the key, literally, and the other was the message. And they would run them round about like this, right? And they would XOR the 2 together. And they made one of the tapes 1 character shorter than the other tape. So that every time it would go around, it would be indexed. You know, the index would change and it would try the message advanced 1 into the key space. And then we just loop this and then we count. Every time they would check the key against the message, they would count the number of times, and this is important, they would count the number of times the characters were the same. The Lorentz machine was very good about mixing up the characters. But remember, it had 2 wheels. They essentially owned the first wheel. They had the key space sequence of the first wheel. But the second wheel was still a mystery. So to break the second wheel, they were looking at messages which had a lot of repetitious characters. Why? Because control characters repeated, return, return, right? Space, space, dot, dot. There was a lot of repetition in the style of the time. And that repetition would show up as a compare, again with the XOR, but for a different reason. If 2 characters were the same, in the comparison, they would end up as being a 0. So they were called the knots, and they were counting the knots, essentially. Every time they got it.
5 minutes, so we need to.
Yeah, we're basically done. Right. So they had, they would count the knots. Whichever offset of the initial key space produced the most repetitive characters, that's how they applied the key on the first wheel, and then they had to kind of play with the second wheel to get it to break. They did develop some tricks, maybe added on to here, some more logic to better break the second wheel and various things. Some of the additional complexity is that they kind of made it 5 times. So it has 5 counters and it counts 5 offsets at one go, but that's not really cryptographically significant. Yeah, I love this idea of Yankee and King Arthur's Court, right? So Alan Turing leaves Bletchley Park. Winston Churchill has told them they have to take their toys and break them into pieces the size of a man's hand. The secret is kept very well. They do use a Colossus or 2 for testing the randomness of one-time pads. They understand the importance of one-time pads. And, but there's this explosion, right? Because Alan Turing leaves Bletchley Park and enters the post-war England having met the future. He's been to the future. He's used the computer. Nobody has used the computer. They're all essentially walking around on their knuckles in terms of technology. And here's this god who just returns from the future and knows about the computer. So he sets about immediately to reinvent the computer, and people are kind of wondering how technology explodes in the post-war England. And of course, it's because Tommy Flowers, in particular, who sets up the first telephone exchanges in England with tubes, really introduces Alan Turing to the notion that tubes can be a reliable computing device. And without that and the Poles deciding to approach this problem with mechanicals, you know, the computer would not have made the leaps and bounds that it did during the war. Konrad Zuse was sitting in Germany in his mom's basement, literally, with a beautiful computer, and it went nowhere during the war. There was no use for it, and at the end of the war, the computer had not advanced any more than at the beginning. The story was completely the opposite in England, and this kind of sets the race off.
And remember, the Americans are aware of this effort, right? This is part of our intelligence history as well. They understand, you know, what becomes the NSA knows about the computer. They know about they know about the Lorenz and the Colossus. They know about the Enigma. They know about the vulnerabilities. And when IBM submits as the first digital encryption standard the Lucifer cipher, NSA says, you might want to tweak that a little bit. We have a suggestion. Why don't we do this, and then we'll call it this, right? That effort is informed. No one knows at that point why, because at that point, we're all completely clueless about the Enigma, Lorenz, the Colossus. We don't know any of this history until 1977. But when DES comes out, it is informed by this, and the government does know about that. So, so back to the demo. This is not completely breaking in the context of this talk. However, no, go back to that. Thank you, the Perez. If I had a T-shirt. Go back. Another one got caught today. It's all over the papers. Teenager arrested. That is the Hacker Manifesto. I leave you with a little piece of hacker culture. Any questions? Gal.
Maybe about the U-boat with the Enigma that was physically captured.
Right.
When did that have to?
So there's a couple periods of time where Bletchley Park and the Poles go dark when the Germans throw 2 new wheels into the mix. Yeah. The British go dark as well when 3 new wheels get dropped into the mix. Later on, they are able to steal one of them. So as long as the 2 of the three new ones are not in the mix, they can decrypt. But if one of those other new ones, because they don't have the wiring pattern for the inside of the wheel, so they don't know that. So there's a big intelligence effort. It's like, hey, all you agents, right? You got to go steal me some more wheels, right? We need to know how they're wired. We need to know what's going on. And there's a period of time when all of a sudden we can't read what's going on, right? And the U-boats are all of a sudden have their way. They start blowing up more ships, right? Because we don't know where they are. Then we get the wheels back. We know where they are. All of a sudden the ships are safer, right? Occasionally we drive, something like the Lusitania, or what's the one we big passenger ship, right? That we drive through there, and we kill off 500 passengers to make it look like we don't know what's going on, right? But they're sacrificed, right? Occasionally we drive a ship in and we blow up some people because we can't let the Germans onto the fact that we know. But so there's one of the interesting narrative stories is Bletchley Park is dark. They can't read it. They need the wheels. One of our cruisers blows up some submarine.
Doesn't actually.
Well, it
doesn't actually.
Right. So
the sub.
Right. The subsurfaces. The sailors like, oh my God,
everybody leaves the ship, right?
Get the heck off, including the captain.
Because it's going to be a head-on direct.
Right. And 2 British sailors dive off the boat, swim into the sub while everyone else is swimming away. Go in. They find the cipher room. The guy hands the machine and the wheels up to the other guy, and first guy in the boat goes down with the sub, right? He risks his life, and these are the stories about how we win World War II and why we're here today. So
this is a picture of Bletchley Park, and this as well. I mean, we went and visited it. It's kind of interesting.
The psychotic architecture on this building. It's even worse.
It's like the Winchester House,
right? It's like a combination. It's like a Lego thing, and it's all stuck together. So anyone else have any questions? Yeah.
Yeah. Could you use your application that you wrote to actually add in some known plain text to speed up the decryption?
So we didn't do that. There's a couple of operational security things that the Germans do. For a period of time, they're double sending the message key. So the message key gets set for every message. So if you're the Germans, how do you set it, right? So I pick a message key. I pick, let's say, ABC, all right? I send ABC in clear text to Ben. Now, all the other settings we both have in the code book, right? I send him ABC in clear text. He sets his machine to ABC. My machine's on ABC. I then pick another message setting for this message, right? I pick XYZ. I rotate my machine, I send, with ABC as the setting, XYZ, XYZ. And it comes out as crypttext, right? He gets something completely different.
So it doesn't come out as QRY, QRY. It comes out as QRYZY.
Right, but he types those in, and what does he get out? He gets XYZ, XYZ. We then both stop. I change my settings to XYZ. He changes his settings to XYZ. I send him the clear text, right? Well, that double sending of the message thing only occurs for a short period of time at the beginning of the war because it's obviously, crypto fail. We could have just written a piece of software that attacks that. It would have been trivial simple, stupid simple, and it's not worth the talk, right? It's not worth your time, right? Because it's too freaking simple, and it's a special case, right? It only occurs for a short period of time at the beginning of the war. So there were a bunch of things like that. Later on, they just send it once.
We're going to do a vendor shout out. This guy actually will repair your Enigma machine if you need it. He's in Charlotte. So
right, that's our vendor pitch.
Is he a sponsor?
Yeah, exactly. So there were a couple of operational things. We made a decision not to try to write software to take advantage of these little things that they come up. We wanted to write something that really worked on the real complexity of the Enigma, right? Not sort of take advantage of some little thing that occurred at some point or some operational problem that somebody might have had. So we made a decision to focus on the hard problem. That's why we did
It's
that.
perhaps interesting that the Colossus, which is Alan Turing's next work, does a kind of frequency analysis, right? It is the character the same or not? So it's counting one bucket. What we're counting is 26 buckets, but it's not a huge leap from counting one frequency to counting 26, although to build the Colossus to do that, seriously problematic. So we're getting the
Right,
Is,
We've
Get off
got
my
the 1
stage.
minute to go twice now.
underneath it, is it a Turing machine?
No.
The
No,
way the
so-
tape moves and
No, it is
So it's not a Turing
programmable
machine, right?
digital computer, but it is not Turing complete.
not a Turing.
Right. All right, thanks very much for being around.